Mortgage, who's here in person. The portion of the presentation that features Dr. Barry Sachs is recorded, but Dr. Sachs is also joining us live on Zoom to answer any questions. This program covers advanced tax strategies by incorporating home equity. This session is approved for 1 CFP continuing education. Christine has spent more than 40 years in banking and finance, specializing in mortgage lending for the past 30 years. She is a certified reverse mortgage professional, a certified senior advisor, and a producing branch manager for Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation in Old Town, Arvada. There are many misconceptions about the reverse mortgages out there. Christine is part of the Fairway team that is looking to change the public perception of this financial planning tool. She does this by educating clients and industry professionals alike about the reverse mortgage guidelines and their improved safety features. Her purpose in utilizing reverse mortgage is to expand options for her clients as they approach the retirement years and to help them increase their wealth by incorporating all assets at their disposal. Christine is passionate about teaching her clients how to take familiar assets like home equity and turn it into a high-performing income generator. Our second speaker for this session is Barry Sachs, a graduate of Harvard Law School who has practiced primarily in the areas of retirement plan law. For 20 years, he has been listed in Best Lawyers in America. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics from MIT. His doctoral dissertation involved extensive mathematical modeling. This modeling carried over to his pioneering research in modeling the use of reverse mortgage credit lines to offset the adverse sequence of investment returns in retirement accounts. This coordinated strategy enables significant enhancements of sustained cash flow throughout long retirements. The first research paper presenting the coordinated strategy was published in the Journal of Financial Planning in February 2012. Two sequels expanding the application of the coordinated strategy to a much wider range of retirees than initially recognized were published in the same journal in October 2017 and December 2021. More recently, Dr. Sachs' research on the use of reverse mortgage has been in the realms of providing liquidity in the silver divorce and providing the means to making Roth conversions of traditional IRAs and 401k accounts. Please help me welcome our speakers.
Thank you. So in the spirit of rolling with the punches, we do have a terrific presentation by Dr. Barry Sachs that you will see today. Unfortunately, because of some technology glitches, that presentation won't be live. However, Dr. Sachs is very excited for all of you to have good information, and so he'll be reviewing the recorded portion of the Q&A section today, and he'd be happy to provide additional insight and illustration for anyone that has follow-up questions after today. So inside the packets that are in front of you, there's a number of materials, including a printed copy of the PowerPoint presentation that you're going to see. We switched the order of a couple of the slides, but to a large degree, it's in there. There's another PowerPoint presentation that's at the back of your packet. This is the full presentation from Dr. Barry Sachs, his PowerPoint presentation, where he is giving a preview in some of the research that he and his brother are currently in the middle of conducting, specifically on the Roth conversion strategy. So Fairway is going to be inviting Dr. Barry Sachs back in a couple of months when his research is concluded. So if you'd like to see the full presentation by Dr. Barry Sachs, please keep an eye on your email or reach out to one of us here from Fairway, and we'll make sure that you get an invitation to come back and join us when Dr. Sachs does his full presentation, probably within the next couple of months. So we expect that to be before the end of the year. All right, so today we're going to give you some advanced tax strategies. Specifically, we're going to be talking about using acquisition indebtedness on a purchase. We're going to be talking about the coordinated strategy that you heard mentioned in Dr. Sachs's introduction. And then we're going to save the best for last, and we're going to be talking about some of the research findings that Dr. Sachs has been doing again in the area of Roth conversions. So let's begin with just a very quick definition of acquisition indebtedness. And you know that this is an important definition to have because of the changes in the tax laws that happened. You might recall that in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in December of 2017, that the IRS clarified that the only home mortgage interest that was tax deductible was that could be attributed to acquisition indebtedness. So basically, the interest paid on a mortgage that was used to purchase or substantially improve a home. That's what is tax deductible. And for so many of our clients, because the standard deduction increased from the $10,000 to $12,000 range to now well over the $20,000 range, many of our clients can no longer meet that threshold in order for the home mortgage interest deduction to really have an impact on them, except for a couple of strategies that we're going to show you today. So I first want to call your attention to your clients that are going to be reaching out to you that are of retirement age and they're thinking about moving in their retirement years. You could probably name a number of clients that are in your database right now that are approaching retirement age. Maybe they are recent empty nesters and they're thinking about selling that 5-bedroom home that they raised their family in and downsizing into a lower maintenance home. Interestingly, the research that was done showed that half of the retirees actually downsize, and half of the retirees that move after they begin their retirement, they actually upsize or go into a similar size home that's lower maintenance. So downsizing, while popularly understood, is not the only scenario that we see, but we're going to take a look at a couple of illustrations today. We're going to look at Cindy's scenario. Cindy is 70 years old. She wants to sell her current home and move closer to her grandchildren. She's able to sell her current home for $400,000. She has no mortgage against it. So when she completes the sale of her current home, she'll be able to slip that money in her pocket, go and move closer to her grandchildren, and her replacement home in this scenario is going to cost $375,000. Now, on the face of it, this might look like a client that you think should pay cash for a house, because who wants to have a mortgage payment in retirement, right? Not any of our clients. But this gal, Cindy, has another dream, and that is that she would really love to fund college expenses for her grandchildren. She was talking to her financial advisor. They wanted to explore the possibility of incorporating an annuity to do that. So, let me go back. So by doing this strategy, this particular client was able to harvest some of the proceeds from the sale of her current home, use it as a down payment, finance the rest of the purchase price using a reverse mortgage, and still had well over $100,000 left over that she was able to use to fund that annuity and cover her kids' expenses, or her grandkids' college expenses. So she was able to have her cake and eat it too. For our clients that are upsizing, this is a common scenario that we're seeing in the Denver market right now and really all across the Front Range, because many of our clients are finding after selling their current home to get into a replacement home, they're going to have to spend quite a bit more money than they thought. In fact, the average sale price right now in the Denver market is well over $600,000. So even if they're moving into a similar size home, often that new replacement home, because it has superior features in many cases, is going to be more expensive. So with simply $373,000 down in this illustration, they're able to finance the purchase of a $600,000 home using a reverse for purchase as the remaining amount. So if one of your clients reaches out to you and says, hey, we're thinking about moving in retirement, ask them to say, let's pause for a minute and let's look at some alternative strategies, because there could be some tax reasons as well as some investment reasons that you might want to set aside some of the proceeds from the sale of the current home. As you know, cash is king, and being able to preserve cash, especially in retirement, for cash flow needs, and for other reasons, it's really important to preserve as much cash as possible. Certainly, the time value of money, you could preach that sermon far better than any of the rest of us. But we also know that retirement is the wrong time to be signing up for mortgage payments. So the strategy of using a reverse for purchase can be just the ticket for many of our clients, allowing them to have their cake and eat it too. And many of our clients also would be in the mode of paying down or paying off their mortgage as quickly as possible, which is going to remove additional cash flow out of their cycle, their spending cycle, but maybe that's not the best strategy for them. There could be another option. And while we don't want to let, this was a quote directly from Dr. Sachs, while we don't want to let the tax tail wag the dog, there are considerations in this strategy that could be useful when you look at and explore all of the different options. Now, the illustration that you see on your screen is going to be, or see on the screen here, is very tiny. So inside your packet, we have a full-size printout. And here's the beauty of using a reverse mortgage to purchase a home. And it's the accumulation and harvesting of the tax deductions. So here's how it works. We put together a sample of a client that was purchasing an $800,000 home. They made a down payment of about $500,000, and they financed $300,000, okay? So the reverse mortgage allows but does not require payments. So it sets them up for an option where they can accumulate interest, bundle it all together, pay it in a single lump sum, and potentially harvest this tax deduction. Specifically, take a look at year number 1, year number 2, and year number 3. Go down that interest column, and you'll see that the interest that accumulates in year number 1 is $21,449. The interest that accumulates in year number 2 is $23,061, and the interest that accumulates in year number 3 is $24,794 in this illustration. So well over $65,000 worth of mortgage interest that can be accumulated, paid in a single lump sum, and once it's paid, it then can become a tax deduction. Now, $65,000, once we get that in acquisition indebtedness as the amount that's paid, now we have a meaningful deduction. So imagine this, imagine a client that has a required minimum distribution, okay? They're required to pull money out of their IRA because they have to. And let's pretend that in this illustration, they have over $65,000 that they're required to harvest out. At the end of the year, they're going to receive a 1099, correct? Showing that they now have $65,000 worth of taxable income. Well, how about this as a strategy? What if they take that money, use it as a payment toward the reverse mortgage, harvest all of that interest at one time, and now they get, in this illustration, a $65,000 1098 that's going to offset the income that would have been taxable. So it's, I was having a conversation with Ed Slott a couple years back and describing this, we were talking through this strategy, and he said, you know, that sounds an awful lot like legal money laundering to me. And I said, yeah, I kind of think you're right. So this illustration, you'll see all the specifics. Again, it's going to be too small to read on the slide here, so we put a full-size printout for you inside your packet. So, question, yes. So in our illustration, we waited 3 years and we accumulated 3 years worth of interest and paid it in a lump sum. So this strategy, in the way that we've set it up here, this won't work every year, but it would work about every third year. Okay, so you wouldn't be able to offset the tax on the RMD every year, but even if you could offset taxes on $65,000 every 3 years, you'd be saving your client a boatload of money. Another question. You're absolutely right. Because of the definition of acquisition indebtedness, only money that was used to acquire the home, or financing, I should say, that was used to acquire the home, or financing that was used to substantially improve the home is tax deductible. Was there another question up here?
Yes, that was passed in 2017.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act, 2017.
Is that the sunset or then in 2000?
So there were numerous components of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and one of the components that's going to sunset was the temporary income tax tier reductions. Yeah, those are going to spring back up to the full amount in 2026.
Does this particular one sunset?
That feature does not. The acquisition indebtedness is now written into the Internal Revenue Code.
Second question, you use the interest rate of 6.77. And you tell me, is that current rate, is that fixed for, is it fixed or variable? Or
It's adjustable.
it's adjustable?
6.77 is the expected rate, and I pulled these illustrations last week, so they're pretty fresh. It's intended, it's a formula that is required by HUD to, it's based on the 10-year swap rate. So it's what investors are actually paying for 10-year treasuries. So it's historically proven to be a pretty close indicator of how these actually perform.
Is it adjustable annually or is it?
Most of our clients are choosing the monthly adjustable right now because of market conditions. There's a lot of belief out there that, God willing, by next year, Treasury bills will start coming back down again, and they want the ability to capitalize on the reduction in interest rates as quickly as possible. Excellent questions. And there was a question back here.
What necessary taxes is
So I'll make sure that Dr. Sachs gets that question. You heard in his introduction that his second career was as a tax attorney, but as he described it to me, it's a little bit beyond carpet and paint to home modifications, adding in ramps, handicap accessible features, complete remodel, adding on square footage, finishing a basement, that sort of thing. Does that help? Great. Okay, make sure to keep the good questions coming, and all of these questions will go to Dr. Sachs, and he'd be delighted to reply in writing. So it's really important as we set up this next section, where we're going to be talking about the coordinated strategy, that I give you a quick little tutorial on reverse mortgages that are being used by our clients that want to remain in our home, remain in their home. Many of our clients do indeed want to remain in their home. So many of our clients are setting up a reverse mortgage so that they can capitalize on the line of credit that grows. Wait a minute, did she just say grows? Yes, she did say the line of credit grows. That is, on a reverse mortgage, the borrowing power, it's called principal limit, starts at a certain point and increases over time. It's guaranteed to grow every month, even if the market is going down. Now, some months the rate of growth will be small. Other months the rate of growth will be much more robust, but it will always grow. So we have an example of a line of credit that could grow beginning at just under $2.25 million, and within 27 years has grown to well over $1 million. That's the orange line that you're looking at. But the green line that you're looking at is the home value. which starting at 600,000 projected to grow to over $1 million at a point in the future. Now, you and I know that the real estate value will not go up in a straight line. It'll sometimes be more robust, and then the value will fall. But we know that given enough time, any piece of real estate that starts at a value of 600,000, historically speaking, will end up at $1 million at point X in the future. So what you're seeing illustrated here is the potential that this line of credit could grow to more than the actual home value. And because of the consumer protections that were built into the program by FHA, it's guaranteed to remain available to the senior, provided that they comply with all of the loan terms, which are they live in the house as their primary residence, they pay their taxes and insurance, they keep the home in good repair. As long as they do those things, that line of credit will always grow, will always be available to them, will not be called due, even if the house value goes down. Okay, so with that as the basis of kind of what you need to know in order for you to have a good understanding of the coordinated strategy, we're going to turn it over now to the video that I recorded just a couple of days ago with Dr. Sachs, and you'll hear he and I pick up on the conversation about coordinated strategy. The video runs for about 30 minutes. After that, I'll come back up and we'll tackle some additional questions.
Okay.
So Dr. Sachs, we've been having a conversation here about the coordinated strategy. And in our conversation, you just made a really great observation that these concepts have existed for a while, drawing from a portfolio or separately drawing from home equity. But I really appreciated what you just said, that the pairing of these two is somewhat recent, yeah?
Very recent. It was first published in February of 2012 in an article that I wrote with my brother, Professor Steve Sachs. And the very same year, a few guys at Texas Tech, John Salter and his collaborators, published the very same idea, a slightly different mechanism, but that's all pretty recent to put these two things together. And Wade Pfau developed the terminology of a buffer asset, the home equity being a buffer asset. And the analogy I like to make is there were two ideas that have been around for a long time. Putting them together is pretty recent. And, think about it. Humanity has had the wheel for millennia. Humanity has had the suitcase for hundreds of years. Putting them together was pretty recent, a rolling suitcase. And in fact, that got a patent. And we got a patent on this. So it's a notion worth thinking about. And as I mentioned in our earlier conversation, financial planners, to get used to this, to see the power of it, should sit at home quietly, whether it's with a cup of coffee, a glass of tea, or a glass of wine, and a handheld calculator. Just go through it. It's only 20 numbers or 20 sets of numbers, and it's not hard to do. But coming out with the power of using the buffer asset to allow the portfolio to recover is a very important notion. And people, particularly financial planners, should become familiar with it, should become comfortable with it.
Yes, and when Dr. Pfau presented to our group back in January, he pointed out pretty clearly for us that in the down years, like we're seeing here on the screen right now in 2008 in this example, by experiencing the devaluing of the portfolio because of the down year in the market, but then compounding that by pulling money out that year as well, that it resets the basis for the following year. So even though the following year we had an improvement in the market, the value went up 25.94% in our example from the Standard & Poor's performance, but it would have done even better had it not also experienced that withdrawal.
Sure, yeah, that's precisely the point, that you've left the money in there to grow with the whole portfolio. So don't take it out when everything is down. Leave it there, because the portfolio if history repeats itself, will grow. And why take away money from the thing that would grow when you can take it from some other source where the cost will be interest, which generally in the long term tends to be less costly than the loss of the growth would have been if you took money from the portfolio.
Indeed. And when we're talking about preparing for retirement and making a portfolio last and having longer longevity or a longer, higher probability of longevity in retirement, certainly we need that for the retiree. They need as much cash flow as possible. But some also consider the importance of legacy. You know, how much, if I perish at a particular age, how much of a legacy am I going to be leaving to my heirs? But this is the concept that has prevented so many people from even considering home equity as a strategy, because they think that they're going to leave the house to the heirs, right? But really what they're leaving is the value of the house to the heirs. Is that what you
Exactly.
find?
I mean, the important thing is what they're leaving to the heirs is what they got. And what they got is generally the sum of two major assets, one being the house and the other being the portfolio. And to the extent that the portfolio is preserved and grows better than it would have if it had been drawn upon after experiencing a loss, to that extent, there's a lot more available in total for the heirs than if the portfolio was exhausted first and then the house is taken. Indeed, we actually wrote this up in an article that the Conference of Consulting Actuaries has put on its website. And you can go to it under papers and comments, go to the Conference of Consulting Actuaries and look for this paper in 2022 by Steve Sachs, Pete Newworth, and Barry Sachs. We got three of us on that one. Steve being...
We've also included a copy of the article in all of the participants' packets.
Oh, great, of this article.
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, I'm very glad because it has beautiful graphics. If you see all those little bar graphs, you'll see that there's a comparison of the value of the legacy if one strategy is used or the other strategy, the coordinated strategy or the last resort strategy. And one of the important factors as you look out into the future, one will see that even if the values are the same of the total legacy, the composition is different. And if the composition is more portfolio and less house, that gives the financial planner more to work with in those later years, even if the aggregate isn't any different. And letting the portfolio manager, letting the financial planner who's helping the retiree manage his or her finances, there's a lot more to work with because the portfolio is something much easier to manage. You can adopt defensive strategies, you can adopt aggressive strategies. You can't do that with a house.
Right.
So it's really crucial that not only is the aggregate value taken into account, but also the composition.
Wonderful. And if any of our participants would like to ask additional questions of Dr. Sachs regarding that article or some of the other material that we're going to cover today, then Dr. Sachs has so graciously agreed to make himself available for additional questions and comments via email after today's presentation. Well, Dr. Sachs, there's another article that we have included in all of the participants' packets, and it's an article that you wrote a while back about preserving the loss deduction. That goes back and speaks to some of the conversation that we were having earlier. Would you like to give a quick overview for our participants?
Sure. The whole point is that there is an interest deduction, although it isn't as great as it was back in the in the 2016 period when the article was written, there still is available an interest deduction to the extent that the interest is interest on acquisition indebtedness. But most estates don't have much income. Most estates of the so-called mass affluent, or us ordinary folks. As a result, the estate doesn't have enough income to offset the interest deduction or to take advantage of the interest deduction, so it's lost. On the other hand, a very simple strategy, which I'll leave to estate planners to figure out how to implement, but generally the trick, as simple as it is to not have the estate sell the home and thereby pay off the accrued interest on the reverse mortgage and lose the deduction for that because there isn't any income to offset there. Rather, to pass the home subject to the debt to the heirs, and then the heirs would sell it and pay off the reverse mortgage interest and offset that against income that they have, particularly valuable if the heirs are also the beneficiaries of the 401k account or rollover IRA, because they're the ones who would otherwise have to pay tax, assuming that this 401k account or rollover IRA has not been Roth converted, which we'll get into in a minute, but assume for the sake of discussion, because most of them are not actually converted. But if it's not converted, then it's taxable, and they can get out the income and not pay tax on it by simply offsetting that amount of income, and it's all taxable as ordinary income, against the interest that comes with paying off the reverse mortgage.
Wonderful.
And that's how the deduction that would otherwise be lost is recovered. And that's the name of the article. It's Recovering a Lost Deduction. Of course, unfortunately, the 2017 tax law, the so-called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, removed the deduction for interest on home equity indebtedness and leaves only acquisition indebtedness as the kind of interest for which a deduction is available.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Sachs, I know many of our participants have been sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for this next topic, and that is the research that you've been doing on Roth conversions. Briefly setting up this scenario, and I'm sure you'll do a much better job of it here than I will, but presuming that we have a bucket of money that's currently in an IRA, and we find that it's impactful to convert this bucket of money from traditional IRA to Roth, and then preserving the full amount by paying the tax from a different bucket.
Right.
So,
okay, well, let's talk about that. First of all, I like to refer to it more as a bucket of securities than a bucket of money, but you mean the same thing.
Okay, very good.
And what we're talking about is the conventional wisdom, which is correct, is that if the money to make the tax payment to effect the conversion comes from the bucket itself, then the only way that this can be advantageous is if future tax rates are expected to be higher for the individual retiree than current tax rates. That is the current rate at which the tax is paid on the conversion. So if one is not sure whether the future tax rate is going to be higher or lower, and for many people it's more likely to be lower than higher, that is to say, after all, we mentioned that retiring is the cessation of income flow from working, then it's very possible for most people, for the mass affluent, although not for the very affluent, that the tax rates are likely to be lower in the future because the income is likely to be lower. But the example that I've worked on so far, and this is a work in progress, but I'm fairly comfortable with these results, is that at least with one example, and that example is the retiree I've called retiree number one, who has an $8,000 fully paid for home and a $800,000 home and a $400,000 bucket of securities in rollover IRA or 401k account. That assuming the exact thing that the conventional wisdom says makes the whole thing not worth it, it becomes worth it. Now I'm going to assume in this example, a 25% if a marginal tax bracket. So we worked this out and we've done it by some pretty clever computer programming that I can't take credit for, but Professor Steve Sachs can, because he did the work. So we're going to go from another source. Now, there are several other sources that have been considered. One is to take the funds to effect the Roth conversion by taking it from some other source like securities, some securities that are owned outside of the portfolio. But that's not, I don't think, a particularly good idea, because all of the income that could be earned from that source of securities is gone. And offsetting the two, I've actually done some calculations with a colleague of mine, a very, very well-respected tax lawyer named Leland Faust, and we've shown that even that can help under some circumstances, because there's capital gain from the securities that are lost, and there's ordinary income tax that's saved in the conversion, but it's not big enough to really help. So let's try yet another source. The yet other source is the home equity, the reverse mortgage. So we're going to work from that. So let's look at the advantages, and then we'll look at the disadvantages of using that approach. So let's get there we go. Okay, so the alternative source, this being home equity, a reverse mortgage credit line, the advantage, there's at least three of them here. The account itself is not reduced, as it would be if the money to pay the tax were taken from the account. There's no current economic benefit that's lost. That is, if you took other securities, you use them to pay it. For one thing, you might have capital gain on the liquidation of those securities, and moreover, it's the continued future gain from those securities is lost. A reverse mortgage, however, doesn't reduce the amount of home that can be enjoyed, so it's nothing current, nothing present is lost. And even if you take a great big reverse mortgage on the house, you can use every room in the house. There's nothing, if you sell off some securities, that much of the portfolio is gone. If you take a reverse mortgage on the house, no portion of the house is lost to your enjoyment. Okay, so now, here's what happens. The usual advantage of a Roth conversion occurs. That is, no income tax on the distributions, not to the account holder nor to the beneficiaries. So less needs to be distributed from the Roth account to equal the after-tax amount of the distributions that would occur from a traditional non-Roth account. So as a result, if there is a perfect match of the after-tax distribution from the traditional IRA or the distribution, because it's automatically not taxed, if those are matched, then you take less money out, and therefore the legacy turns out to be greater. Okay, so let's look at the next slide and consider the disadvantages. The disadvantage, the major disadvantage, of course, is the interest cost, the interest accrual on the reverse mortgage loan. So there's a draw on the credit line, and that has two negative effects, two disadvantages. The draw on the credit line would occur early in retirement, and it would be a substantial portion of the amount available. As a result, the interest that will have accrued when the loan is finally paid off is likely to be substantial. And in fact, in some calculations we've done, when you've run out to 25 or 30 years, the debt is bigger than the value of the house, at least taking the conservative view that we often do, that the home is growing at only 2%. The reverse mortgage folks like to think 4%, and maybe they're right. It certainly has been recently. I've only taken the view up to 2%. And in that case, as it happens, the debt exceeds the value of the house. But I don't want to say this in a callous way, but so what? Because it's a non-recourse loan. So that takes advantage in a very remarkable way of the non-recourse feature of reverse mortgage loans. The other disadvantage is that because a substantial portion of the available reverse mortgage loan is already taken up by the conversion, the use of the remaining amount in the coordinated strategy is reduced, but it's not lost. So let's see some results. We actually have graphed some results for this example. And as I mentioned before, what we're looking at is a retiree who's making the conversion, who has a 25% marginal tax bracket, and who has a home worth $800,000 at the outset and a retirement portfolio of securities, a bucket of securities or money worth $400,000. And let's see what happens. We've got a graph of this result that we've done. So look at the, unfortunately, this graph is a very dark background. Maybe, I don't know if you can see an orange line, and this is the accrued cumulative amount distributed from that on an after-tax basis at 20 years, at 25 years, and at 30 years. And we're looking at an amount that's distributed beginning cumulatively at 20 years being over $600,000, and at 30 years, it's over $1 million. By contrast, the after-tax amount, which is almost invisible here, I guess it's nearly invisible. Can you see it, Christine?
Yes, we can.
It's the dark line, which is way below. And the difference is, I think, about a $200,000 difference cumulatively over 20 years. And as much as I'm looking at it, it looks to be more than $400,000 of difference, maybe approximately that amount over 30 years. That's substantial. This is spendable, the difference in spendable total amount on an after-tax basis, meaning define spendable as money that you have left over after paying taxes, if taxes are due, and if not due, because it's a Roth, then it's all spendable. I wonder if it would be possible to put in a graph. It started much more visibly, but the color scheme that got translated from my own private color scheme to the company color scheme lost a line somewhere in translation. And let's look at the next slide, and then I'll make some comments.
Well, and then we can also print out a non-colored version of
Sure.
for the participants.
That would help. Okay, now we've got here the legacy amounts. And incidentally, I want to note that the amounts we're talking about are median amounts. And what that means is, after all, we're looking out into the future, 20 years, 25, and 30 years. Well, over that time, we're looking at Monte Carlo simulating all different kinds of events that might occur. Because, as I said before, history doesn't repeat itself, it only rhymes. So that I'm looking at the median of a fairly wide dispersion of results. The computer program that I use, which is a very sophisticated program put out by I've already forgotten the name, but it's an excellent source of software. And Oracle, I knew it was an O word. It's Oracle. It's Oracle's Crystal Ball.
Okay.
And it's a superb Monte Carlo simulation. It's not something I wrote myself. There's no way that I know of anybody but a top flight professional programming system could produce anything as elegant as this. And it's Oracle's Crystal Ball, and they do Monte Carlo simulation and all sorts of results of the simulation. And they produce these beautiful graphs of all the different possible outcomes. So it turns out that this program in 15 seconds can run 1,000 30-year scenarios. And I've chosen the middle one of each of those 1,000 different 30-year scenarios, and figuring that half of them are worse and half of them are better. So the median is the middle, and this is the middle. And if you notice that the bottom one is the bottom line is the median legacy for the traditional IRA or 401k account, and the top one is the median for using a Roth conversion. So in other words, what happens is because you're not taking as much out of the portfolio over time, even though a lot of the reverse mortgage has been consumed in making the conversion, you still got more aggregate left. There's not much home equity. In fact, there's probably none, but it's the portfolio that is so well buttressed by the sum of the coordinated strategy and the Roth conversion that you end up with a whole lot more money to leave. And indeed, if you think about it, the heirs generally don't want mama's and daddy's home anymore. They're typically people in their 60s, 50s, 60s, or 70s who are well established in their own homes. They would only have the task and the real estate commission to engage in and pay off in selling the home. So why bother? Why not the portfolio, which, by the way, they can draw over time, over a 10-year period. And incidentally, the regulations on this have not been fully set out, whether they have to draw it uniformly over the 10-year period or can wait till the end of the 10-year period following the death of the original account holder. But so that's to be
sure that forgive me for interrupting, but I want to make sure that I heard this correctly. So the conclusion from the scenarios that were run is that certainly we'd be leaving less equity to the heirs, but we'd be preserving more portfolio value. And it's the aggregate of the two that ends up more advantageous.
Absolutely.
So not just equity by itself, not just portfolio by itself, but the combination, the aggregate of the two ends up higher.
Right, and indeed, it's most likely, if you look at the paper on the Conference of Consulting Actuaries website, you'll see that by 25 years, there's not much home left, if any. And so what? I mean, you can still live in it. The retiree can live in the home, even if all the equity is consumed, and there's still money in the portfolio. And that's how that works. Indeed, there's enough money to keep paying insurance and maintenance and property tax, so they can keep the home. They just don't have any equity in it. But so what? They've got all their wealth in a portfolio that financial planners can manage and that is worth a lot more than the sum would be if they didn't do the Roth conversion. Excellent. And again, it's a rather interesting use of the non-recourse feature. And who knows how HUD will feel about this at some point if this were to become widespread. And you know, I don't want to hide that fact, but that's, and well, you know, the probability that anybody is going to live long enough to consume all that equity is not terribly high. Mortality is, you know, it's still there. We're all mortal, and sooner or later we'll consume our lives as well as our wealth. So anyway, I'll conclude by observing that the conventional notion that a Roth conversion only provides economic benefit if the account holder will have a higher tax rate at a later time. That isn't correct when a different source is used, and that different source, as a reverse mortgage credit line, is quite viable, at least in the situations where we looked at a home a lot more valuable than the portfolio, which turns out to be most people. Most people actually, even at the sort of middle of the mass affluent, have a home worth more than their retirement savings. They should do better in retirement savings, but they don't. And to the extent that the ratio is higher than 1-to-1, that is to say that the home value is higher than the portfolio value, means that their availability of money from the portfolio to, money from the reverse mortgage line of credit is there to buttress the portfolio and effect a Roth conversion. Both means we're getting a double benefit from that home equity. And most important for me, at least, is I have to do a lot more analysis with other marginal income rates and with other parameters, being in particular the ratio of home equity to portfolio value has to be done. And working on it, and that's part of what my project is, so.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Sachs, if we invite you back to do a presentation once the remainder of your research is complete, Fairway would be delighted to have you back as a guest, and we'd
Be my pleasure.
Thank you.
I
Thank
would be
you.
honored and delighted.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Sachs, you have been, as always, very enlightening, very helpful today. And I hope that our participants have found that there are some options available that they might not have considered in the past. We're going to go back to the live presentation inside the classroom, but Dr. Sachs has very graciously, once again, agreed to listen to all of the questions that come up in the classroom. And if there is additional information that would be useful, Dr. Sachs will be submitting that commentary to us in writing within the next couple of weeks. So thank you again for being with us today. It has been
Thank you for organizing it. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it too.
All right, enjoy your day.
Thank you.
All right. So again, I want to point out that inside your packet, there's a separate stapled bundle of a PowerPoint presentation that begins new perspectives on Roth conversions. Because of time constraints, we had to abbreviate the portion of Dr. Sachs's presentation discussing the Roth conversion. So you'll see more detail, and that one slide that didn't translate well is all in the presentation. I would also be happy to send larger versions to anybody that would like. So a couple of other quick things that are inside your packet. There's a case study sheet. If you would like to run an illustration of a client that you have in mind, please use this case study sheet to send the information over to me, and I would be happy to run through the illustrations, and we can explore whether or not this could be a useful strategy for one of the clients that you have in mind. I've also included an invitation to a workshop that we host on the second Saturday of every month, and a few other materials inside the packet. So I know we have just a couple of minutes remaining. I'd be happy to tackle questions that are coming from our online guests, and then also tackle questions from folks in the room. I've seen 2 hands so far. Let's start with you, and then we'll do yours next.
I presume if it's a negative equity situation at the end, is it the taxpayer that needs the difference?
No. No, interestingly, there's a mortgage insurance program that's funded in as a portion up front. And the taxpayers, as long as this program has been in inception, the taxpayers have never had to fund a single dollar. Any claims that have ever been paid have all been paid out of the insurance fund. It's called the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund. We're expecting the release of this year's audit probably within the next few weeks. And the predictions from the FHA commissioner is that it's going to say that it's overfunded right now. And as a result, we're optimistic that they'll start considering some reductions in the cost of the mortgage insurance. Okay, there was a question up here, and then we'll get down to yours. Happy to resend the video to you, and I believe it'll be on the FPA website as well. Absolutely. Yes.
I want to follow up on Jay's.
Great.
Let's use an example.
Mm-hmm.
The house is worth $700,000.
Mm-hmm.
Cumulative interest
Mm-hmm.
$2 million.
Sure.
So there's a forgiveness of $300,000.
There's a claim of $300,000.
Typically, tax law in general says debt forgiveness is taxable income.
I know. On a forward mortgage, that's accurate.
Since it's non-recourse,
Mhm.
is it not taxable, or is it what the income tax by the IRS, does that look at as debt forgiveness?
No, Dr. Sachs and numerous other CPAs have confirmed repeatedly that there is nothing taxable about that debt forgiveness. It's literally an insurance claim. question?
From first getting on the web, did you consider taxes from the heirs one? The home sale wouldn't trigger taxes for them, whereas the portfolio would.
So Dr. Sachs did address that in the presentation. You can see a little bit more in his article, Recovering the Loss Deduction. But I'd be delighted to make sure that Dr. Sachs gets an opportunity to comment on that question as well. Thank you, Christine, for that question. What other questions in the classroom or online? I realize I'm the last thing standing between you and lunch. So one more quick note that I wanted to make is be sure to reach out to me if you would like to be invited back in a couple of months when we have Dr. Sachs return to do a presentation for us detailing all of his findings for the research that he currently has in process on the Roth conversion strategy. Thank you so much for letting us be a part today, and I hope this was useful for you.
Thank you so much, Christine. All right, so we've got a taco bar, I've been told, set up out front. So we'll reconvene in here at 1 o'clock. I don't think there's going to be enough seating outside, so you're welcome to bring stuff back in here to eat. And I'm smart enough to shut up and let you go eat.
You could buy a single stock and go all in on one company, or own the sector and invest in keeping good company. Is it so radical to be so rational?